Merci, Monsieur le Président. I wish to thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for organizing this panel discussion on an issue of growing importance. Over the past decades, we have periodically returned to this Council, sometimes in stressful circumstances, to discuss how best to combat intolerance, discrimination, and hatred based on religion. The Resolution 53/1 adopted by the Council last year was one such occasion. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights mentions dignity even before it mentions rights and freedoms. Hate is the first line of attack on human dignity. At the heart of hate is the fear of the other. Geopolitical conflicts, historical grievances, misperceptions, and misuse of social media can provide the triggers for hate-based crimes such as attacks on religious texts. Burning religious texts has a dangerous past and often is a precursor to violent crimes. Unchecked public spectacles of attacks on religious books and symbols have historically escalated to bringing down places of worship, reclaiming lands, dehumanizing a group of humans, and forcing displacements and finally mass killings. Two of the deadliest mass crimes against humanity in the last century began by burning books, the Holocaust and the war against the Bosnians. Last year's Qur'an desecration incidents took place for a simple reason. There was nothing to stop it. Public censure and legal deterrence were either missing or inadequate. The absence or inadequacy of response by states, the duty bearers of rights, can be traced to three reasons. First, the normative growth to counter intolerance, hatred, and discrimination based on religion has a checkered history. While there is a convention on racial discrimination, there is only a declaration on religious intolerance. Second, the international consensus to combat hatred based on religion stands on thin ice due to differences in ideological approaches. And third, the thresholds generally identified to test incitement levels have been set so high that hate speakers have significant room to maneuver. The results are apparent. Despite a decade after the first adoption of the Consensus Resolution 1618, all forms of religious hatred has been rising. In that context, the Council's response to last year's incidents was legitimate, necessary, and proportionate. Mr. President, a conversation to combat religious hatred can be misperceived as a threat to freedom of speech. Some see it as an attempt to protect a religion or its symbols. Both these views have often retarded further progress apart from being incorrect. We know that international human rights law envisages duties, responsibilities, and limitations on free speech. If more free speech were the only antidote to hate speech, then hate speech would have declined. However, that has not been the case. Similarly, combating religious hate is not about protecting a religion. It is about protecting the people who pursue that faith from the human rights impacts of unchecked hate. 13 years ago, I had the honor to pilot the Human Rights Council resolution known as 1618 in this Council. It was celebrated as a landmark success, and rightly so, because it established consensus for the very first time on this issue. The resolution provided a mix of affirmative and preventive measures. It inspired the Istanbul process and the several national plans, measures to protect places of worship, and a collaborative spirit. But 13 years since its first adoption, the challenge of intolerance and hate has risen manifold. Factors such as new technologies have emerged, rapid disinformation has been weaponized through social media. Creating religious hate is turning into a ticket for electoral success. The adoption of last year's Resolution 53/1 can be seen in this broad context. Speaking out against enacting legal deterrence is necessary for tackling the vilest forms of hatred. Resolution 53/1 has clarified the need and thresholds for action on the desecration of holy books. Since the risks are real, so the case for specific prohibitions is strong. We believe that the burden of legal remedy should not be entirely left to the victims of hate. Mr. President, HRC Resolution 1618 was a delicately balanced compromise at the heart of which is a roadmap for action. Two elements of this action plan, which included speaking out against the advocacy of religious hatred and criminalizing incitement, are vital in combating religious hatred. Implementation of these areas has lagged behind, resulting in episodes of hostility and violence. Lack of implementation can immediately lead to an avoidable breakdown of consensus on this vital issue. The Council must therefore be sensitive to the growing risks to one of its signature achievements that is reflected in Resolution 1618. I thank you very much.